In all the days of the Third Age, after the fall of Gil-galad, Master Elrond abode in Imladris, and he gathered there many elves and other folk of wisdom and power from among all the kindreds of Middle-earth, and he preserved through many lives of men the memory of all that had been fair, and the house of Elrond was a refuge for the weary and the oppressed, and a treasury of good counsel and wise lore. In that house were harbored the heirs of Isildur in childhood and old age, because of the kinship of their blood with Elrond himself, and because he knew in his wisdom that one should come of their line to whom a great part was appointed in the last deeds of that age. And until that time came, the shards of Elendil's sword were given into the keeping of Elrond, when the days of the Dunedain darkened, and they became a wandering people. In Eriador, Imladris was the chief dwelling of the High Elves, but at the grey havens of Lindon there abode also a remnant of the people of Gil-galad, the elven king. At times they would wander into the lands of Eriador, but for the most part they dwelt near the shores of the sea, building and tending the elven ships, wherein those of the firstborn who grew weary of the world set sail into the uttermost west. Círdan the shipwright was lord of the havens and mighty among the elves. Of the 3 rings that the elves had preserved unsullied, no open word was ever spoken among the wise, and few even of the Eldar knew where they were bestowed. Yet after the fall of Sauron, their power was ever at work, and where they abode, their mirth also dwelt, and all things were unstained by the griefs of time. Therefore, ere the Third Age was ended, the elves perceived that the ring of sapphire was with Elrond in the fair valley of Rivendell, upon whose house the stars of heaven most brightly shone, whereas the ring of adamant was in the land of Lorien, where dwelt the Lady Galadriel. A queen she was of the woodland elves, the wife of Celeborn of Doriath, yet she herself was of the Noldor, and remembered the day before days in Valinor, and she was the mightiest and fairest of all the elves that remained in Middle-earth. But the red ring remained hidden until the end, and none save Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan knew to whom it had been committed. Thus it was that in 2 domains the bliss and beauty of the elves remained still undiminished while that age endured. In Imladris and in Lothlorien, the hidden land between Celebrand and Anduin, where the trees bore flowers of gold, and no orc or evil thing dared ever come. Yet many voices were heard among the elves foreboding that if Sauron should come again, then either he would find the ruling ring that was lost, or at the best his enemies would discover it and destroy it. But in either chance, the powers of the three must then fail, and all things maintained by them must fade. And so the elves should pass into the twilight, and the dominion of men begin. And so indeed it has since befallen. The 1 and the 7 and the 9 are destroyed, and the 3 have passed away. And with them the third age is ended, and the tales of the Eldar in Middle-earth draw to their close. Those were the fading years, and in them the last flowering of the elves east of the sea came to its winter. In that time the Noldor walked still in the hitherlands, mightiest and fairest of the children of the world, and their tongues were still heard by mortal ears. Many things of beauty and wonder remained on earth in that time, and many things also of evil and dread. Orcs there were, and trolls and dragons and fell beasts and strange creatures, old and wise in the woods, whose names are forgotten. Dwarves still labored in the hills and wrought with patient craft works of metal and stone that none now can rival. But the dominion of man was preparing, and all things were changing, until at last the Dark Lord arose in Mirkwood again. Now of old, the name of that forest was Greenwood the Great, and its wide halls and ales were the haunt of many beasts and of birds of bright song. And there was the realm of King Thranduil, under the oak and the beech. But after many years, when well nigh a third of that age of the world had passed, a darkness crept slowly through the wood from the southward, and fear walked there in shadowy glades. Fell beasts came hunting, and cruel and evil creatures laid there their snares. Then the name of the forest was changed, and Mirkwood it was called, for the nightshade lay deep there, and few dared to pass through, save only in the north, where Thranduil's people still held the evil at bay. Whence it came, few could tell, and it was long ere even the wise could discover it. It was the shadow of Sauron, and the signs of his return. For coming out of the wastes of the east, he took up his abode in the south of the forest, and slowly he grew, and took shape there again. In a dark hill he made his dwelling, and wrought there his sorcery, and all folk feared the sorcerer of Dol-Goldur, and yet they knew not at first how great was their peril. Even as the first shadows were felt in Mirkwood, there appeared in the west of Middle-earth the Istari, whom men called the wizards. None knew at that time whence they were, save Círdan of the Havens, and only to Elrond and to Galadriel did he reveal that they came over the sea. But afterwards it was said among the elves that they were messengers sent by the lords of the West to contest the power of Sauron if he should arise again, and to move elves and men and all living things of good will to valiant deeds. In the likeness of men they appeared, old but vigorous, and they changed little with the years, and aged but slowly, though great cares lay on them. Great wisdom they had, and many powers of mind and hand. Long they journeyed far and wide among elves and men, and held converse also with beasts and with birds. And the peoples of Middle-earth gave to them many names, for their true names they did not reveal. Chief among them were those whom the elves called Mithrandir and Curunir, but men in the north named Gandalf and Saruman. Of these, Curunir was the eldest and came first, and after him came Mithrandir and Radagast, and others of the Istari who went into the east of Middle-earth and do not come into these tales. Radagast was the friend of all beasts and birds. But Curunir went most among men, and he was subtle in speech and skilled in all the devices of smithcraft. Mithrandir was closest in council with Elrond and the elves. He wandered far in the north and west, and made never in any land any lasting abode. But Curunir journeyed into the east, and when he returned, he dwelt at Orthanc in the ring of Isengard, which the Númenóreans made in the days of their power. Ever most vigilant was Mithrandir, and he it was that most doubted the darkness in Mirkwood, for though many deemed that it was wrought by the ring raids, he feared that it was indeed the first shadow of Sauron returning, and he went to Dol-Goldur, and the sorcerer fled from him, and there was a watchful peace for a long while. But at length the shadow returned, and its power increased, and in that time was first made the Council of the Wise, that is called the White Council, and therein were Elrond, and Galadriel. And Círdan, and other lords of the Eldar, and with them were Mithrandir and Curunir. And Curunir, that was Saruman the White, was chosen to be their chief, for he had most studied the devices of Sauron of old. Galadriel indeed had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties and no allegiance, save to those who sent him. And he would abide in no place, nor be subject to any summons. But Saruman now began to study the lore of the rings of power, their making and their history. Now the shadow grew ever greater, and the hearts of Elrond and Mithrandir darkened. Therefore on a time Mithrandir at great peril went again to Dol-Goldur and the pits of the sorcerer, and he discovered the truth of his fears and escaped, and returning to Elrond he said,
"True, alas, is our guess. This is not one of the Ulaidi, as many have long supposed. It is Sauron himself who has taken shape again and now grows apace. And he is gathering again all the rings to his hand, and he seeks ever for news of the One and of the heirs of Isildur, if they live still on earth."
And Elrond answered,
"In the hour that Isildur took the ring and would not surrender it, this doom was wrought, that Sauron should return. Yet the one was lost," said Mithrandir, "and while it still lies hid, we can master the enemy if we gather our strength and tarry not too long."
Then the White Council was summoned, and Mithrandir urged them to swift deeds, but Curunir spoke against him and counseled them to wait yet and to watch.
"For I believe not,"
he said,
"that the One will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell, and long ago, I deem, it was rolled into the sea. There it shall lie until the end, when all this world is broken and the deeps are removed."
Therefore naught was done at that time, though Elrond's heart misgave him, and he said to Mithrandir, "Nonetheless I forebode that the One will yet be found, and then war will arise again, and in that war this age will be ended. Indeed, in a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us that my eyes cannot see."
Many are the strange chances of the world,
said Mithrandir,
and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter.
Thus the wise were troubled, but none as yet perceived that Kurunir had turned to dark thoughts and was already a traitor in heart, for he desired that he and no other should find the great ring, so that he might wield it himself and order all the world to his will. Too long he had studied the ways of Sauron in hope to defeat him, and now he envied him as a rival rather than hated his works. And he deemed that the ring, which was Sauron's, would seek for its master as he became manifest once more. But if he were driven out again, then it would lie hid. Therefore he was willing to play with peril and let Sauron be for a time, hoping by his craft to forestall both his friends and the enemy when the ring should appear. He set a watch upon the glen fields, but soon he discovered that the servants of Dol-Goldur were searching all the ways of the river in that region. Then he perceived that Sauron also had learned of the manner of Isildur's end, and he grew afraid and withdrew to Isengard and fortified it. And ever he probed deeper into the lore of the rings of power and the art of their forging. But he spoke of none of this to the council, hoping still that he might be the first to hear news of the ring. He gathered a great host of spies, and many of these were birds. For Radagast lent him his aid, divining naught of his treachery, and deeming that this was but part of the watch upon the enemy. But ever the shadow in Mirkwood grew deeper, and to Dol-Goldur evil things repaired out of all the dark places of the world, and they were united again under one will, and their malice was directed against the elves and the survivors of Numenor. Therefore at last the council was again summoned, and the lore of the rings was much debated. But Mithrandir spoke to the council, saying,
"It is not needed that the ring should be found, for while it abides on earth and is not unmade, still the power that it holds will live, and Sauron will grow and have hope. The might of the elves and the elf friends is less now than of old. Soon he will be too strong for you, even without the great ring, for he rules the 9, and of the 7 he has recovered 3. We must strike."
To this Kurunir now assented, desiring that Sauron should be thrust from Dol-Goldur, which was nigh to the river, and should have leisure to search there no longer. Therefore for the last time he aided the council, and they put forth their strength, and they assailed Dol-Goldur and drove Sauron from his hold, and Mirkwood for a brief while was made wholesome again. But their stroke was too late, for the Dark Lord had foreseen it, and he had long prepared all his movements, and the Ulaidi, his 9 servants, had gone before him to make ready for his coming. Therefore his flight was but a feint, and he soon returned, and ere the wise could prevent him, he re-entered his kingdom in Mordor, and reared once again the dark towers of Barad-dûr. And in that year the White Council met for the last time, and Curunir withdrew to Isengard, and took counsel with none save himself. Orcs were mustering, and far to the east and the south the wild peoples were arming. Then in the midst of the gathering fear and the rumor of war, the foreboding of Elrond was proved true, and the One Ring was indeed found again by a chance more strange than even Mithrandir had foreseen, and it was hidden from Curunir and from Sauron. For it had been taken from Anduin long ere they sought for it, being found by one of the small fisher folk that dwelt by the river, ere the kings failed in Gondor. And by its finder it was brought beyond search into dark hiding under the roots of the mountains. There it dwelt until even in the year of the assault upon Dol-Goldur it was found again by a wayfarer. Fleeing into the depths of the earth from the pursuit of the orcs, and passed into a far distant country, even to the land of the Pirianath, the little people, the halflings who dwelt in the west of Eriador. And ere that day they had been held of small account by elves and by men, and neither Sauron nor any of the wise, save Mithrandir, had in all their councils given thought to them. Now by fortune and his vigilance, Mithrandir first learned of the ring, ere Sauron had news of it. Yet he was dismayed and in doubt, for too great was the evil power of this thing for any of the wise to wield, unless like Curunir he wished himself to become a tyrant and a dark lord in his turn, but neither could it be concealed from Sauron forever, nor could it be unmade by the craft of the elves. Therefore, with the help of the Dunedain of the north, Mithrandir set a watch upon the land of the Pirianath and bided his time. But Sauron had many ears, and soon he heard rumor of the One Ring, which above all things he desired, and he sent forth the Nazgul to take it. Then war was kindled, and in battle with Sauron, the Third Age ended, even as it had begun. But those who saw the things that were done in that time, deeds of valor and wonder, have elsewhere told the tale of the War of the Ring and how it ended, both in victory unlooked for and in sorrow long foreseen. Here let it be said that in those days the heir of Isildur arose in the north, and he took the shards of the sword of Elendil, and in Imladris they were reforged. And he went then to war, a great captain of men. He was Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the 39th heir in the right line from Isildur, and yet more like to Elendil than any before him. Battle there was in Rohan. And Curunir, the traitor, was thrown down, and Isengard broken. And before the city of Gondor a great field was fought, and the Lord of Morgul, captain of Sauron, there passed into darkness. And the heir of Isildur led the host of the west to the black gates of Mordor. In that last battle were Mithrandir and the sons of Elrond, and the king of Rohan, and lords of Gondor, and the heir of Isildur with the Dunedain of the north. There at the last they looked upon death and defeat, and all their valor was in vain, for Sauron was too strong. Yet in that hour was put to the proof that which Mithrandir had spoken, and help came from the hands of the weak when the wise faltered. For as many songs have since sung, it was the Pirianap, the little people, dwellers in hillsides and meadows, that brought them deliverance. For Frodo, the halfling, it is said, at the bidding of Mithrandir, took on himself the burden, and alone with his servant he passed through peril and darkness, and came at last, in Sauron's despite, even to Mount Doom. And there into the fire where it was wrought, he cast the great ring of power. And there into the fire where it was wrought, he cast the great ring of power, and so at last it was unmade, and its evil consumed. Then Sauron failed, and he was utterly vanquished and passed away like a shadow of malice, and the towers of Barad-dûr crumbled in ruin, and at the rumor of their fall many lands trembled. Thus peace came again, and a new spring opened on earth, and the heir of Isildur was crowned king of Gondor and Arnor, and the might of the Dúnedain was lifted up, and their glory renewed. In the courts of Minas Anor, the white tree flowered again, for a seedling was found by Mithrandir in the snows of Mindolluin that rose tall and wide above the city of Gondor. And while it still grew there, the elder days were not wholly forgotten in the hearts of the kings. Now all these things were achieved for the most part by the counsel and vigilance of Mithrandir, and in the last few days he was revealed as a lord of great reverence, and clad in white he rode into the battle. But not until the time came for him to depart was it known that he had long guarded the red ring of fire. At the first, That ring had been entrusted to Círdan, Lord of the Havens, but he had surrendered it to Mithrandir, for he knew whence he came and whither at last he would return.
"Take now this ring," he said, "for thy labors and thy cares will be heavy, but in all it will support thee and defend thee from weariness. For this is the ring of fire, and herewith maybe thou shalt rekindle hearts to the valor of old in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the grey shores, guarding the havens until the last ship sails. Then I shall await thee."
Wide was that ship, and long was it a-building, and long it awaited the end of which Círdan had spoken. But when all these things were done, and the heir of Isildur had taken up the lordship of men, and the dominion of the West had passed to him, then it was made plain that the power of the three rings also was ended, and to the firstborn the world grew old and grey. In that time the last of the Noldor set sail from the havens and left Middle-earth forever. And latest of all the keepers of the three rings rode to the sea, and Master Elrond took there the ship that Círdan had made ready. In the twilight of autumn it sailed out of Mithlond until the seas of the bent world fell away beneath it, and the winds of the round sky troubled it no more, and borne upon the high airs above the mists of the world, it passed into the ancient West, and an end was come for the Elder of story and of song.
Starless night.